Hi, everybody. We will give a minute or so for people to join, but good morning, good afternoon, based on where you guys are joining from. See a few more people logging in. So we'll get started in just a minute. All right. Well, it looks like we've got a good number of people on, so let's go ahead and get started. Thank you, everybody, for joining today's session, the second one that we're doing. Really excited to talk more in depth about our new solution, Visual Camera Health, as well as our partner, Actuate. My name is Erin Bullard, and I'm the Director of Partner Relations here at Immix. So I manage our technology and our integration partners. And I've had the pleasure of working with Actuate with our various joint solutions that we've built together. A little bit of quick housekeeping before we get started. I do have a couple of folks on the line that may jump in periodically. They may ask or answer some questions or address anything as it comes up. So you may see or hear from Chris Selwood or Tina Similaris along the way. If you guys want to just give quick introductions of yourselves, and then we can jump in.
Sure. Hi, everyone. I'm Tina Similaris, Vice President of Global Customer Experience at Immix, and we're excited to share our latest solution in development and partnership with Actuate.
And hi, I'm Chris. I'm the EMEA Sales Director, Commercial Lead for the whole of the EMEA region. And I too am very pleased to join the team today to participate in sharing our latest offering with Actuate.
And I appreciate both of you guys being here and supporting the webinar process. So briefly, before we do get started fully into the presentation, just want to give a quick lay of the land. So there is a place where you guys can go ahead and submit questions. If you have anything that pops up along the way, please go ahead and put that in. If it's quick and easy, Tina or Chris may answer it in the interim, or we can try and get to it at the very end. We have left some time for Q&A. There will be some poll questions that we will be asking you guys along the way as well. And then we also have a resource section. So there is a handout on VCH or Visual Camera Health if you guys would like to download that. And like I mentioned, we will get to any Q&A that we're unable to address in the chat at the very end. And if there's anything that we can't get to, then we will follow up an email or set up a follow-up call. So with that, let's go ahead and get started. So quick agenda. After we kind of go through this kind of intro, we will get into kind of why we decided to create this solution, get into more of what it is, what it delivers. We'll give kind of a walkthrough of how it works, and then we'll get to the Q&A. So with that introductions, like I mentioned, I'm the Director of Partner Relations, but I did want to give a little bit of context to my background since I'll be speaking just a little bit to some past experiences. So before I came to Immix, I was actually an Immix customer. I was with Securitas, and I started there supporting the regions, the guarding regions and their technology sales. So I was putting together integrated guarding designs and working with the engineers on pricing and proposals before kind of moving up the ranks to eventually oversee the entirety of the marketing and the operations of the SOC, as well as the remote guarding services. So I have had that firsthand experience of both making those calls and receiving the calls when a camera is offline and services can't be performed. And unfortunately, sometimes critical incidents get missed because of that. So I have the pleasure of drawing from that experience to develop these meaningful solutions that Immix customers can utilize as we do help you guys kind of curate your service offerings. Which brings me to our guest today. I am pleased to introduce Brian Karrasch from the Actuate team. Brian, if you'd like to give us a little bit of insight as to your background and what you really do with Actuate.
Sure. Thanks, Karen. Thanks for having us. So yeah, I'm Brian Karrasch with Actuate. Currently heading up the U.S. Eastern region, but like Aaron and I imagine many people on this call, I've been in this space in the industry for a while now. Most of my roles in the past have been global, so I've helped set up central stations, not just in the U.S. but around the world with organizations that want to get into, I've always been associated with like AI companies and advanced technology. So I've helped a lot of organizations get started with video monitoring, and it's, as cool as the AI and the person detectors and, the really advanced stuff has always been, there's also always been this need for just a real good base level, camera integrity product. And so that's why we were excited to partner with Immix on visual camera health, because we can take our capabilities that we're going to tell you about here, pair it with Immix's reach, and give give our collective customers a really great way to not just catch bad guys, but also make sure that the cameras are able, ready and able to catch the bad guys when they show up. And so excited to get into this today.
Exactly the point I was going to make. You can't catch a bad guy if it's not working. So I will give just a brief overview of Immix for anybody who might not be familiar, but I won't spend a lot of time here. So Immix is a software platform that is designed for central stations and alarm receiving centers, really any company that is looking to provide professional commercial monitoring centers, services like alarm monitoring, which would include things like video verification, more interactive monitoring services that might include audio, referred to as remote guarding, more bespoke services like remote SOC as a service, but would also incorporate things like proactive remote patrols, and maybe things like entry management services or video escort, supervision types of services as well. So we do integrate a wide range of security products and technologies into a single operator interface. So that does create this single pane of glass, which is intended to manage anything that has that safety or security component to it. And that creates a consistent user experience for your operators, as well as anybody else who could be engaging with your services. So end users, if you do manage dealers, and that's kind of how you take your services to market, then that also is a consistent user experience for them. So that helps, of course, to reduce training costs, improve operational efficiency, which are things we are always looking to do, but especially when it comes to operators where you can have higher levels of turnover, that's pretty important. So our integration library does consist of over 500 products. That does, we are looking to give you the choice of technology without having anything Immix specific hardware wise that you would have to install. So while we have largely been focused on video, and that is our bread and butter, we do serve as, an aggregator for these other types of technologies. So that does include access control, alarm receivers. You will see situational awareness technologies, AI, of course, automation platforms, and then even things like lone worker solutions. So combining those into this single pane of glass. And with that, we have several solutions that we have built with Actuate, and that Actuate is powering. And, we started with them with the AI Link solution, and they are one of our providers that helps to scrub out false alarms. And, what Brian was alluding to earlier with the detection and the false alarm filtering, that's really what that is intended to do, and leveraging the AI that they can really prominently support there. And then we have visual camera health, which is what we're going to be touching on today. And then in the future, you will see things more advanced in auto patrol, which will incorporate more of their advanced AI solutions. So we're really excited to have kind of this full ecosystem with Actuate that we have worked to kind of create this partnership around. And Brian, if you want to give a better background of Actuate itself and the company, that would be fantastic.
Yeah. Sometimes I like to say we're possibly like one of the biggest AI companies that you may not have heard of yet, because our model has been to work with our central station partners and companies like Immix, and we power thousands of over 21,000 customer sites. Obviously, those all have multiple cameras, so you can imagine we have a very large number of cameras supported on our platform globally, and our job has really been to basically take those incoming events, those incoming image streams, and scrub out the noise. I sometimes call it like a video spam filter. That way, operators only have to handle the things that have bona fide, actual interesting activity in them. So we've helped a number of organizations clean up their operations and expand and effectively become more profitable and offer better services to their customers, because we can get rid of that noise layer, and then have a lot of even beyond the basic spam filtering, a lot of other capabilities, smoke and fire detection and gun detection and things like that we can provide to help expand available services in the market. So some of the numbers here that we put together from the marketing side, as you can see, we've operating around the world, we've had great retention, great customer growth, and it's just really been fun to participate in helping people grow their businesses with Actuate.
Absolutely. And Brian, I
So,
think with your background, I'll let you speak to the operational challenge here.
Sounds good. Thanks. Yeah. So this is, I think this is a situation we've found ourselves in from various angles. If you've been in this business for more than a month, or you've got more than a couple of cameras, is that on paper everything sounds good. We set up cameras, we use AI, we detect people where they're not supposed to be. We put that in front of an operator very very quickly and efficiently, and can enable live audio talk down and police dispatch and things like that. And it goes along great until you get that call from one of your customers that comes into their business Monday morning or Sunday afternoon or something. They call you up and they're like, things are missing, things are broken, something happened, and why didn't you catch the bad guys? That's what we're paying you all this money for. And then digging into it, frequently, what we find is that the reason no event came through is because something was impacting the camera's ability in the first place. It was offline. The network cable got chewed through by a squirrel. A switch got taken out in a lightning storm. The camera was moved. The lens is blurry. Something happened that prevented what we really rely on, and kind of the parts of the system that we take for granted, that cameras are simple and reliable and functional these days. And once you set it up, you don't have to worry about it. You don't have to think about it. It's going to just operate forever. Well, the reality is that can be true even in the majority of cases. Once you get to thousands of cameras and tens of thousands of sites like we have, inevitably things break, things go offline. And if you're not checking that, you don't find out about it until it's too late. And again, when you're small, you might be able to have one of your operators in their spare time just go around and pull up cameras and check and make sure that they're streaming, that they look good. When you're getting into scale, that just doesn't work. You can't have a person going and looking at every customer's camera all the time and making sure that they're good, or even as we'll discuss, like we detect a scene change. So a crisp, clear image coming from the camera doesn't necessarily mean that's the crisp, clear image that you were expecting, and that's looking where the bad guys are going to show up. So visual camera health and the AI components we built to power that were all born out of direct customer feedback saying, we love the AI side. We love the whole part of this side when it works as anticipated, but how do we make sure nobody gets caught off guard from the things outside of our control? And here we are.
Unfortunately, it's from a lot of well-laid intentions, I think is what's interesting. From the monitoring center side, to your point, if you're small, you might have a little spare time from your operators and you're able to focus that time on more proactively checking these. But when you start to hit that scale, trying to coordinate an operator's time, but also trying to, account for that and document that accordingly can be very difficult and very laborious. And it only takes one time for a camera to be offline and somebody to call you and say, oh, are you not checking these things? Did they not notice? For that trust to be broken between you and your client. And so I think that is what we're looking to improve, and we're trying to do that without putting more onerous or laborious impact onto the central station. But those awkward conversations are not fun to have, but I think it's a lot of it is because there's a bit of who's responsible for what. What are the expectations between who is maintaining the cameras and who is monitoring the cameras. And when you have maybe joint ownership of some of that, it does become difficult in making sure that there is open lines of communication and those expectations are set properly. The training of your operators matters a lot there. And when you blur those lines, again, you see that communication break down, and it does start to go back to just that cycle of undermining the trust and degrading the value of services that are incredibly valuable. So again, the solution is really designed to improve that in the most efficient way, so it kind of operates in the background without you having to worry about it. And with that, I believe we have our first poll question. We want to understand a little bit more from you guys what your experiences have been. So how many of you guys have ever had this experience where you've discovered the camera was offline after an incident has occurred? See some yeses coming in. So if you've been doing this, it's hard not to have that.
Yeah. Yeah, not surprising, but kind of an overwhelming majority there. That I think we've all found ourselves in this situation from different angles over the years, and it's funny too because I think so often the end users don't understand what the central station really does, and I've overheard the conversation. It's like, how could you not know? Weren't you looking at the cameras? And they don't realize, actually, no, by default in the standard arrangement, nobody is looking at the cameras until something happens, until an event comes in, that there's not just a guy in a room staring at your cameras all the time after hours. And but yeah, that one miss, like you point out, Aaron, it can really undermine trust because of that misunderstanding if if the user finds the problem before you do.
Absolutely. And yes, it looks like good numbers there that we're able to share with you guys. So what does VCH, as you'll hear us refer to this, visual camera health, what does this deliver? What is the value behind this solution? So this is really about ensuring that camera uptime, making sure that you do have a compliant scene, that it is set to look at the field of view that you intended it to look at. Beyond that, it's helping to reduce that operational risk. You'll see here on the right-hand side, we are going to refer to this as your operational insurance policy, making sure that everything is working properly. Again, within Immix, it's great if it is visible within the VMS locally, but when you have so many components that may impact delivery outside of that network, if it has to go through a VPN, if you're looking at, IP whitelisting, things like that will impact the delivery into other systems, including Immix. And it really matters that your operators can see it for monitoring purposes. And that's really what VCH is intended to do. It is automated, like I mentioned. This is intended to be a solution that is a little bit of set it and forget it. And it is scalable. So it's something that, can grow as you grow and your solutions and your services grow. It does include multiple daily checks, so 4 to be exact. And then you have the choice of whether or not you want to raise this to an operator for them to handle in some way. We'll talk a little bit more about when you may or may not want to do that. But that choice, I think, is really important here on being able to customize your services to your end user, as well as just managing your operations the most efficiently according to how you want to build out your service model. It's applicable to any camera. And Brian, I think when we were building out this presentation, you made such a good point that it doesn't necessarily have to be one of your detectors. You know, those are absolutely critical cameras that you want to make sure are up and operating. But you have a lot of cameras that work for situational awareness, that work for compliance, and make sure that you have, you know, that recorded history should you need it. And VCH assures that that is actually recording, that it is actually working and looking at the right things and online. So I think that is, you know, a great point to be made there. And then of course, super simple configuration in Immix. So no additional hardware, no additional IT requirements on the site. Like I mentioned, if it's connected to Immix, you can enable it for VCH. I did want to mention, I think we'll try and do a survey after this session and understand what you guys might want more information on. I think setup has been one that we've seen a little bit more of, that people want to understand how to set it up. So happy to touch on that in maybe a later session. And Brian, I'm going to let you kind of go through what the key capabilities are as they relate to Actuate.
Sure, thanks. So the first part, and I'm glad you put the network integrity side of this on the left, because I think so often when people think about you know, visual, you know, camera health monitoring and visual camera health and all that kind of stuff, we tend to focus on the image part, and of course we cover that, but VCH using Actuate's technology, we're also looking at network integrity stats, connectivity stats, to make sure to ensure that you don't have a good camera with a poor connection, especially if you're only doing, you know, low resolution throughput and things like that. It's possible that when the scene is still, that you would get, you know, you would get good images, but then if things get busy and noisy and you've got, you know, VBR setups and the bandwidth spikes, that's when like pixelation and errors occur. So we start by looking at the network integrity itself and make sure that packets can get from the camera all the way through into Immix and make sure there's no problems there. And then we also look at the scene integrity, you know, scene change, image quality, things like that. Like we point out here, you know, blurring and smudging, or the scene having moved. And in the scene integrity side of this, we don't just do a simple like pixel for pixel comparison. The AI behind it does attempt to learn the scene and to be able to intelligently and accurately detect the kinds of changes you'd want to know about, you know, the camera being moved or shifted or tilted, but also understanding some of the context of the scene. So like, for example, a parking lot that's full during the day and empty at night shouldn't generate a scene change alert, because there's some understanding of the objects in the scene and some context around what's causing all these individual pixels to ultimately change. And so we really tried to build this on the network side, the scene integrity side, kind of like what it does, and also in a roundabout way what it doesn't do, right, by alerting on parking lot changes and things like that, to make sure that it scales with your business, which you know, makes it I think very cost effective to implement, very cost effective to monitor, and it becomes a very high value solution, you know, to your customers.
Fantastic points, and agree with you. I think the parking lot solution interesting, and I will allude to the fact that we will have solutions that may detect that should you want to in the future, as we are developing auto patrol. So how does this work? Just to give kind of a brief overview of the full process, assuming that you have these cameras connected to Immix, the configuration is super straightforward. You go to where you actually enable these, and you just simply select the sites that you want to connect. And then if you don't want any of the cameras on there, you would deselect those. From there, Actuate will establish that baseline that Brian was referring to by analyzing the camera's scene that is dynamic to account for those natural environmental changes, time of day, more vertical specific or environmental specific, like the parking lot scenario. From there, once that baseline is really established, it's going to be running those health checks 4 times per day. So it's going to be analyzing the live stream in real time, and it's going to compare it to not the reference image that you may have set in Immix, but the one that Actuate has kind of built by their baseline analysis. And I do want to go back to this. This baseline analysis is not a week-long process. It's, you know, a day, around a day, and say a day, 2 days maybe. And if you do want to get more specific, you know, there is the ability to mask out certain areas and adjust that. But by default, it's extremely straightforward. From there, the event triage process, based on how you configure it, whether you wanted it to raise to the operator or not, you know, those critical issues would be routed to your operators, and then whatever script you may have set for them to follow, that's what they will follow. If you would prefer to have a silent logging for, you know, more of those non-urgent, non-emergent events, then those will be compiled into reports. Your technical teams can review those and resolve those proactively based on how you would like to manage them. And then from there, in terms of kind of the operational response and the reporting, the flagged issues do support kind of a range of response actions. So whether or not you want technician dispatch, or if you need the camera reset or a service audit follow-up, you know, I think that is what you're looking for, you know, with either the escalation alerts, the actions that your operator might take to inform somebody of taking these actions, or in that silent logging process, what your technical team may actually be responsible for doing, depending on how you are set up or how that site is set up to be managed. Despite how you manage those, all health events, all VCH events are logged, and they're going to be available downstream for reporting, for compliance, SLA, visibility. So all of this is kind of available as you would see any Immix event with the full audit trail of what took place. And actually, before we get to this, we do actually have another poll question. So we would like to understand a little bit more about how you guys manage camera health today for your customers, whether that's something that your operators are doing manually, if you guys might already be using a third-party technology, if that's something that is more of a responsibility of your customer or their integrator, whoever's maintaining those, or if it's more of when a customer reports. And we'll give these just a minute to stabilize. It looks like it's a pretty good mix, Brian.
Yeah. I think kind of similar to the previous webinar we did on the US side. I think responses seem to be a little bit all over the board, and in many of these cases, I think indicate an upsell opportunity for monitoring partners to offer this through and help automate those processes and make it more efficient and reliable. Absolutely.
No, totally agree with you there. So I mentioned that in terms of the event triage process, we did want to go a little bit more in depth. So the different escalation options and then the action taken, so those intervention tiers, I think they correspond pretty well. If there is some kind of internal escalation where, it's more for if your team is responsible for managing this for additional review, if they are looking at, let's say IP whitelisting, things like that. they're able to troubleshoot those. And then maybe it's something that is remote actionable if it requires a reboot of the NVR or the camera, resetting the VPN, whitelisting an IP address, things like that. That's a pretty simple escalation option. On the other hand, if it's not a team that you're able to access or manage, then informing the customer and having them take that action. And maybe it's something where the customer has a pretty strict IT process and they may need to get their IT team involved. So if they do have, strict firewall rules, if there are additional IP configurations required, those are a couple examples that we have listed there. The third would really be if there is maybe more of an on-site, boots on the ground response required, more technical support. So a service ticket would need to be generated, and then having that technician that would actually go to the site, maybe physically reposition if there's like a drastic scene change, or clean the lens if there's a blur or something of that nature. And then the last is, again, like think of these last two of more of your, especially your critical cameras. If there's anything that is beyond your control, if there's a power loss, if there's an ISP outage, if there's something weather related, act of God, those kinds of things might require additional contingency plans where you might have to have security coverage. So having that process in place that your operator or your customer notification would activate. And then just understanding how your services might need to be adjusted for the interim during that time. So just outlining these based on whether or not you would want those alerts to raise to your operator or not, or if they are silently logged based on those options. And then we did want to look at kind of the human cost, comparing those that might be doing this manually and more of that reactive approach against being able to do this more proactively. So when you have to rely on operator time to do this, you're of course looking at those direct costs, the wages, of course their benefits, PTO, time off, trainings that might be required, certifications that might be required, but you really have to also take into account more of those indirect costs, the day-to-day supervision. I was also mentioning, like, how do you organize this? How do you account for this? How do you ensure that they're happening? And how would you put in place the communication strategy? So that kind of supervision does carry its own cost that can be difficult to account for, especially at scale. And then of course you have the equipment and the workspace requirements. Any person that is doing this and taking their time to do this requires equipment to do so. And then the operational risks here. Humans make errors, and from person to person, my interpretation of how drastically a scene has changed might be different from Brian's. So that can be difficult to set the expectation with your customer on what is going to be detected, what is going to be escalated, and what isn't. And then of course, when you do have people that are spending a lot of time doing these kinds of things, you have an opportunity cost that is lost here from being able to focus on things that do carry, a higher profit margin. So you could have them be doing other services, but because of this, because they are spending time doing something that could be automated, is unfortunately consuming that time. So the problem here is that manual check and that impact on your people and that operational drain. Using a solution like VCH, using this does shift that burden from people onto the technology, and it creates that consistency. So I think turning something that is more of a cost into a value-driven opportunity is really what this allows you to do. And Brian, I don't know if there's anything you wanted to add there.
Yeah, no, I mean, that really covers it. And I'll say, over the years, I've been involved in a lot of technology businesses and various managed services things. And it's always, there's so much benefit when you call a customer proactively and tell them something is broken that they weren't aware of. It really helps kind of cement your perception to them as like a value added provider. And it also gives you a really good way to ensure that you made a good point, Aaron, about making sure that they're aware that this is impacting your ability to deliver services. And that way, if something does happen, and because this is all flowed through Immix and the operator actions are logged and everything is in there. So even if even if there's a missed incident 4 shifts later and it's a different person who didn't know about that conversation and that previous, VCH event, they have that in there. And if that customer calls in and is upset that an event was missed because their equipment was in a state that didn't allow it, to be seen in the first place, it puts you in, as a provider, I just think in a much better position. You don't start out that conversation on the defensive and saying, well, let me look into it, let me check. And then you come back and you tell them, well, their cameras are offline. And like, it might be their fault, but it doesn't really make you look any better when it took you a day to figure out something you should have known 2 days ago. So these kinds of services, I think I think we're going to be seeing this a lot more in the industry as things continue to progress. And this is going to be a cornerstone of a end-to-end offering.
Absolutely. No, you actually reminded me of another situation that I had where, again, best laid intentions, the operators were on the ball and they did detect these issues. They saw that it was a full site, actually, full site cameras were down. They reached out. But when you start reaching out with multiple people to the customer several times, because that information isn't necessarily passed over the shifts, you start to look like you're not communicating amongst your people. And that's something you want to make sure that you are accounting for. And, again, during COVID, when I was kind of working with operations, it is difficult. And this helps to just make sure that that is a non-starter and it's not something that your operators have to worry about.
Yep.
So with that, let's take a look at what VCH actually looks like. What does it look like in Immix? So I've got a quick video that's going to show you, how this comes through. So you'll see these as patrols, you'll see the VCH. I'll go into it just a little bit more depth. But as you click in, this is, for those that are familiar with Immix, this is your typical site monitor view. You've got this audit trail that, again, you're going to be familiar with, that accounts for everything when those streams were requested, if there were any issues with those. And those, of course, have this red raise. And then you have this footage, again, if it's available. If it's a connection failed, you're going to see that black screen, but you're going to have this visibility to exactly what it is in the footage that was viewed and assessed. And then with the scene change and the field of view change specifically, you will see that there is a reference image that can actually be popped out. So it can be extended and expanded to really have that side-by-side view, so that if it is, a very specific change or something that is harder to see, it makes it very simple for your operator to quickly pick out what was the difference between those two scenes. So in a nutshell, that's kind of what it looks like. And then this just goes a little bit more into showing you exactly how this pops out, and looking at the fact that, you will see it in this right-hand corner of your audit media on the left hand. And I will skip over this one because we touched on that. But I did want to mention the fact that, where these are raised. I think that's come up since we've launched this, and I want to make sure that it's, clear that VCH is categorized as non-emergency patrol events. They are categorized as patrols, as checks. And so you will see this tag, you'll see the red kind of brackets with VCH in it. And that makes it easy for the operator to see that that is a VCH check that was raised. And then you'll see this reason for the raise that would be included. So for image quality, camera resolution, blurred view, video loss, no video. Scene change, you'll see the field of view change, rotation, tampering, occlusion, lost connection, connection failed, and then stream quality, low frames per second, or an unstable stream. Those are the different tags that you might see along with these different raises in the patrol notes. So Brian, I want to give you maybe just another chance to kind of reinforce a little bit more of what each of these means. If there's a few more examples that you wanted to provide as well, based on what this is really looking for. And I'm happy to expand on how it kind of comes into Immix and some of the workflows that might be taken from that. You are muted. Webinar bingo.
Thanks. Yeah, so kind of just to reiterate, we're checking network integrity and image integrity, and kind of breaking those at the top level into two macro level categories like Aaron showed you. And I think that helps. That helps as you're triaging or routing things internally. Like if there's a hard connectivity kind of issue or a network related issue, you may want to pass it over to your IT department, or you may very quickly determine that it's a customer/integrator issue, and you contact them and hand it over to them for resolution. And then there's a scene change side, which is we're looking for we're intelligently looking for scene change elements. Anything that makes the scene different than the reference images, with an understanding that at the same time, scenes do change daily, as lighting changes, as shadows change, and we don't want to be alerting all the time. So we've put a lot of effort into making sure that there's AI applied to the scene change, and trying to give more context around, what type of change we've seen or indicated from. Because like, if it's an obstruction, like an example here, I'm not sure if my microphone switched. I think you can still hear me.
I can still hear you.
All right, okay. All right. Thanks. So like if it's an obstruction, and the truck is a perfect example, because I've seen this so many times at car dealerships and shipping, depots, where it's like this is a customer induced error, right? But you want to call them up and say, hey, nice truck that you parked in front of the camera, but until you move it, we can't do our job. If the lens is very blurry, if the scene is useless, then that requires an in-person visit to fix the camera. But the other thing, if it's just a minor scene change, and these are the kinds of things that sometimes operators blowing through these can miss. If the camera has shifted slightly, the scene might not be perfect, but it could be still usable. But then if you're using regions of interest or exclusion zones or anything like that, you may need to temporarily adjust those so that the rules and the triggers driving your system are now aligned with the current field of view. You'd probably want to have the camera put back, or it could be that the camera shifted and you can adapt to that shift and let the customer know that, they might have never known this, they might have never seen it, but it helps drive that value add component back to them, that, hey, we're paying attention to things, we're noticing small elements. And that way, again, that's the kind of thing I've seen when this is done manually. Operators sometimes miss those scene changes that are just enough camera movement to throw like calibrations and zones and regions and things off, but not enough to immediately jump out to anyone who looks at the camera regularly. But again, that ultimately undermines your ability to monitor the site. So we're looking for all these kinds of things, trying to put all the AI and all the intelligence behind it, so we can percolate this up in Immix to actionable events that you can then use to, provide your services to the customer and show value.
Make a reference, kind of an example with scene change that pulls in AI link as well. You know, if you have your analytics configured and you are looking specifically to rule out, let's say, a public highway or a public street, and you start, you know, you get a scene change where your camera has been moved, that field of view now includes the roadway, and you are getting a ton of false alerts. You know, your AI link settings may have changed. You start to see a ton of these raises. You know, I think those are things that indicate, you know, big issues, and they can have significant operational impact for your team. And again, if the analytics are configured on the devices and your scene has now changed, that could be a huge risk that your analytics might not be working or functioning properly anymore. So those are definitely things that you would want to be aware of and potentially escalate depending on the criticality of that camera. All right, looking at image quality and stream quality.
Yeah, a few more examples of these. The other thing that you just made me think of too, Aaron, that I think is important to note is, you know, visual camera health is powered by Actuate, and while we would love you to have Actuate be the, you know, the detection analytics powering the other half, we recognize that there's a lot of options in the market, and I think it's important to note that this doesn't require you to be subscribed to other Actuate AI or other Actuate products. That you can use Actuate, you know, the Actuate powered visual camera health alongside any other AI, you know, AI from any other provider, or again, just to reinforce what we said earlier too, I think even more commonly, cameras that aren't being used as detectors, that aren't being monitored, but maybe a part of your monitoring strategy. You know, PTZs can be a good example, particularly with network issues, where a lot of times part of the response protocol is a fixed camera as a detector, and then a PTZ is used to roam around the site. And I think I've kind of found over the years, I think PTZs, because there's so many moving parts, just tend to be more prone to all kinds of random errors and failures than fixed cameras. And so if that PTZ is part of your response strategy and something has caused it to go offline or become impacted, you might not ever realize that if you're not using visual camera health until, you know, the bad guy jumps the fence and the operator goes to engage the PTZ, something's preventing it from working. So I think it's really important to think about visual camera health as a literal site-wide option, and making sure that everything is always, you know, always ready and enabled for that response plan, or even when things aren't driven by remote guarding and are driven by an interior event, that when a customer goes to get video for any reason, that you can now give them an assurance that video will be there.
Absolutely. All right. So I want to do a quick time check. We've got about 12 minutes left. Only a few more slides to get through, but I do want to make sure that we have some time for questions. So touching on, you know, how would you actually get started with this? How would you set it up? Like I mentioned, it's extremely simple configuration. You know, you can configure this kind of at a higher level. You don't have to go in camera by camera, but then once you do, you can click the different cameras, and, you know, if you didn't want to include certain ones, or if some you did want to raise and some you did not want to raise to your operator, it's pretty simple. Those cameras and kind of their linkage and how they would feed into Actuate are all done through Immix. So it is a very simple, seamless process here for this configuration. In terms of reviewing the events, the review might look a little bit different than your standard events, but that event, the event that you would typically see is still there. But this is more of, you know, kind of going through and looking at, you know, if you wanted to filter by a healthy versus unhealthy, you're able to do that. You can see the execution time. You can see, you know, if there are any that have not fully processed, you know, you can certainly create those filters as well. So pretty simple. Like I mentioned, happy to create some follow-up sessions. I know I'm kind of just briefly grazing over this, but I did want you guys to have a little bit of visibility into what this looks like as we look at the full VCH solution. We have created several reports for VCH specifically that would be available within the reports section of Immix. And with that, again, here's just a brief glance at what they look like. They look maybe a little bit different than some of our other reports. And you've got this summary section. You can filter the healthy, unhealthy, and then there's more of a comprehensive kind of high level overview of those as well. So it's pretty simple. And then just in summation, you know, I think we've really said a lot that visual camera health is a great foundation to make sure that your monitoring services can be provided, and that it is important that they can be provided within Immix. Again, they might be operational local at the site, but making sure that camera feed makes it all the way to Immix in a way that is presentable and monitorable to your operator is really the critical piece here. And that does create this operational insurance policy that does kind of reinforce and make sure that you can provide your services and solutions to your customers. So we do want to make sure that this is proactive. This can be automated for you. It is scalable. And again, we're trying to create more efficiencies for your team. We're trying to reduce risk for your team and make sure that you know, there is accountability in here, that you don't have to do all manually. And I think with this, it is that proactive safeguard to really strengthen your monitoring ecosystem and making sure that you don't have these blind spots and you don't have to worry about who is responsible for communicating this to the customer. You have these processes in place and you have these actionable insights to be able to escalate as needed based on how you have this set up. So that is the visual camera health solution. And with that, let's go ahead and get to some questions. So Chris and Tina, do we have, and actually, I'm so sorry. I believe we do have one last poll question to ask of you guys. And then we will get to the questions. I think understanding how you guys would factor camera health into your service model today, if that is something that is part of your base monitoring service and maybe you're not upselling separately, or if you are, if it's more of a standalone service or solution, justifying a premium price point, or if it's not monetized. Sorry, I almost forgot about the last poll question. We'll give these just a minute. All right, I think those have stabilized. Those look pretty good. All right. What questions do we have?
We've got a couple of themes, and then there's a specific one here that's quite intriguing. One of the things, the main theme is, what's the resolution? What's the minimum maximum resolution these will work with?
Oh, great. I can take that one. Really, 360p is a good rule of thumb resolution. We don't ever tend to need anything more than 720p. So it's really been designed to work with, you know, not requiring super high resolution images and being compatible with what I'd say is the, you know, vast majority of cameras out there, even if they're, you know, fairly old legacy cameras with reduced resolution substreams. Resolution wouldn't really be an issue.
Okay, thank you. Quite a specific one here. Can it be enabled on some sites but not others? And then also, does it work with cloud-based systems like OpenEye, or is it limited to traditional IP port connections?
Happy to answer both of these. So it can be enabled on some sites. It can be enabled on some cameras on that site. It is all customizable within Immix. And in terms of what it works with anything that is connected to Immix. So if you have that device connected in Immix and you can pull up a camera stream, you can enable it for VCH.
Okay. Another quite technical one. What happens when cameras go into nighttime mode?
The answer is ideally nothing. This is part of what we anticipate. You know, as part of the technology that's gone in to build this. In particular, if the cameras are intended for monitoring purposes and they go into nighttime mode, that's going to imply that you know, that you're expecting to get a usable image out of the camera, right? And so we can adapt to that. We understand that even though the pixels may have gone from color to black and white, the scene itself has not changed, and we can accommodate that. If it's a camera that during the day has a great image and, you know, in night mode is completely dark and there's nothing to analyze, you may get a scene change alert from that. There's some adjustments and some things, or you might just schedule that one, that if that becomes a problem, to not generate alerts at night, because if the, you know, that is one thing that is not really possible for algorithms to detect, right? Is that if it goes from any kind of a very good scene to just a whole bunch of empty pixels, that's not that easy to differentiate from someone throwing a tarp over a camera or purposefully occluding it in some other way. So in that scenario, it's more representative of something that the technology has been designed to detect.
Okay. And probably the most generic popular one that we're having this afternoon is when will this actually be available to us?
It is available now. Any other questions?
I can't see any others that are coming in that are any different from those themes at the moment.
Okay.
All right. Well, I just want to close by saying thank you to everybody who took the time out of your day to join. Thank you so much, Brian, for joining me on another one of these. You're a fantastic co-presenter, and it's always a pleasure to work with Actuate. And thank you to Tina and Chris for helping me as well.
Thanks again for having us, Aaron. I really enjoyed it.
And with that, we will close. Thank you, everybody.